Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. How you are doing out there in the listenership and the viewership of PlanetTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program called What's Going On here that airs from 2 o'clock to 3. And we will be here preceding the program called Satori's Black History Corner, which comes on today about 3:30 and stays around for about 30 minutes. We're always delighted to have you out there, and we hope you'll stay tuned for the next hour. We're going to be covering a couple of topics here, which we think you'll find of some interest. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the things that are happening in the Middle East, and as it relates to what is happening in our country. And I hope I have enough time to talk about a couple of other things that have to do with some of the finance that I'm doing some research on. I'm not ready to do the series that I have in mind on Facebook, where I plan to do it in sometime, probably in about 3 weeks, a 5-part series on the Federal Reserve System. But I'm not ready yet to come forward publicly with that. I'm still doing the last touches of the research on that piece. But I will be putting something on the Facebook airways, and hopefully we'll be doing something at the studio as well to interface with what we're doing on Facebook. But I have to do about, I've read a lot of books on it just in preparation, and I have taken some notes that I want to use in terms of doing the pieces on it. But I don't like to jump out there half prepared, and so it's going to take me about 3 more weeks, I think, given how my research is coming, to put it together, because I had to go back and do a lot of things at the beginning to see if this really was created, what we're saying the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, although I know the act was enacted during that year that established the Federal Reserve. I don't think that we can call it the creature of Jekyll Island at that point, and my research is showing something different. So I want to wait until I get more of the puzzle figured out, and then when I feel like I'm ready to go forward with it, I will in fact do that. But to come out and have findings that disagree with some of the ones who've written very scholarly on this area, in this area, then I need to make sure that all of my ducks are lined up and all my T's are crossed, my I's are in fact dotted. Because to come out here in public and put something up there and you're not really prepared to defend it, people looking always looking for ways to come in and make it appear that you have not done your homework. So I don't want to give them any more ammunition than they already have in that area. So anyway, look for that down the road a piece. Today I want to talk about a video. I want to at least start out talking about a video that I saw yesterday, I think it was, that aired on Fox Network. And I get these things I get it later because I only see it when it's posted on some website on Facebook, or I may see it on some other network that has to do with the internet, because I don't watch television anymore unless I'm targeting certain events that I want to watch as a special event. Mainly just maybe it really nothing in the news. I've turned that off, and I don't watch any news programs anymore because I just do not want to have to sit there and be insulted by those in the media that claim that they are presenting an unbiased report, which is biased at least on 2 levels. One is what they choose to report on, and then there's the other bias in terms of how they slant that which they do report on the news. So then you're getting a double dose of a media bias basically from the left. And rather than waste my time with that, I wait until somebody posts something, or I may run across the video and I'll watch it because it has a specific segment that it targets that they covered on some of the on the commentary programs. One of the ones was the one that was done, I guess it came since Megan Keller's program comes on 5 days a week, so I'm assuming that it would have been a program that was done last week. And it had to do with her bringing on a person that is a Muslim that is really standing up against some of the things that are happening in the name of Islam. And I think he's a sincere person in terms of his trying to warn the West about what it is actually facing with this upsurge we're seeing right now from the Islamic extremists. We want to call them extremists. I'm not so sure that's true, but those who are more vigilant, more extreme in their carrying out the tenets of Islam. I think Islam is I think the Islamic teachings, what is in the Quran, is extreme. So I don't think. So I think that there are different expressions of it by different Muslims, but in terms of what is in the Quran, there are extreme things that are called for and required. If you are practicing Muslim based on Quranic teachings, it calls for extreme behavior. So that's that I think that needs to be understood.
In one spot it says to actually behead those who don't follow the Prophet.
It does say that, and there are other things in it. I had some of the verses written down in one of our earlier programs of things that showed that some of the people that are acting upon those principles are acting upon what is really stated in quote unquote the book, and I think we have to be clear about that. I was watching Megan Keller's program. Well, the segment that she did had a guest on there, and I've seen him on a number of other shows as well. And he comes on to put his fingers on what bothers him about those who are practicing the religion. He's a Muslim now. He comes out and he talks about those who he has a problem with in terms of how they're expressing their views in Islam, in the Islamic religion. And he takes exception to some of the things that are going on by groups such as ISIL, take your pick what name you want to call them, IS is Islamic State, or ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIL, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, which is the Arabic name for Syria. So the discussion was quite interesting because before they had the gentleman that was a guest that was responding to what's going on, they played a couple of passages where they had different segments where they had different parts of the Obama administration that were these persons were coming out and denying that ISIS is an Islamic group. We heard it first of all from Obama in the speech that he gave about 2 weeks ago on Wednesday when he spoke for 15 minutes before the nation. Came out and said that the Islamic State is not an Islamic group. It's not a state and it's not Islamic, because Islamic, there's no religion that teaches what they're doing.
I got to quote here right from the Quran. I have a copy right here.
Okay, good.
Chapter beheading, chapter 8, which is Surah Al-Nafal of spoils and war, revealed at Medina, 75 verses. It's from 8:20. This is chapter 8, verse 12.
Mm-hmm.
Remember thy Lord, inspire the angels with the message. I am with you, five firmness to the believers. I will instill terror in the hearts of the unbelievers. Smite ye above their necks and smite all their fingertips off them. So, yeah. See, and they say those are the radicals.
Mm-hmm.
If you follow the book, you're going to be a radical.
Mm-hmm. Can you read? See what is verse? What is Surah 8:5 saying? Can you read that and see if that?
8:5.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Surah means chapter. What does that say?
Yeah, I've got chapter 8 here, and you said 5, verse 5?
What does that say?
Okay, and here it says, just as thy Lord ordered thee out of thy house in truth, even though a party among the believers disliked it. So basically, that's like maybe taking it, maybe I don't have the. It's hard to look up sometimes when they refer to it different. We call these all surahs. Surah, but I mean they have like it's a very hard book to read through. I don't know if you ever tried.
Yeah, I read through it.
It's like it jumps around. It's got like
it's not thematic where it I think that when the Quran was put together around 635. The Prophet was, at that point, it passed. The Prophet died in 632. And the Quran, according to Godfrey Higgins in his book called The Anacalypsis, which means looking back at the ancients, in volume 1 of his 2-volume work, he says that the Quran is not that of the Prophet, because by the time the Quran is put together from different places, it couldn't have been his, because 3 years later, the Quran is being put together and the Prophet's not at that point alive.
Besides, he couldn't read or write, according to what I've read. He was illiterate. He had slaves who were literate. And another thing is too, like you said, they compiled it from one account that I read. There was actually pieces of bone that they scratched things onto. And there was like parchments. They had written things on animal, hides. They put some stuff down. So it's very loose. And other things too, when they talk about biblical characters from the Bible, and they actually got them out of order. Another thing, that Miriam, who is the mother, the sister of Moses, is now also they refer to in the same breath as being the mother of Jesus. So I mean, it's like their chronological time frame is totally off too. I mean, it should be 3,000 years old at that point. So I mean, and I never knew that Miriam, who we call Mary. So I mean, and they quote scripture out of context. The people in the book scripture. So I mean, it's basically a hodgepodge of Christian and Jewish literature.
Yeah, you're making a point. I have read the Quran, and it is in many ways it's incoherent in terms of you looking for, and just in the sense that if you're looking for the kind of continuation of the story as it is in the Bible, for example, and I'm not speaking to favor either one. I'm just talking from a secular standpoint at this point, making an observation, is that you have in the Bible you have Genesis and you have Exodus, and it goes into the the 66 books in the Bible. So there are 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. So you see this continuation, then you go to the New Testament, you see Matthew, and you start there at that point. You don't have that kind of continuation in the Quran. It jumps around a lot more than what you have in the Bible, and that may be some of the difficulty in terms of following some of it, because it doesn't really follow that kind of a pattern that we're used to in the West, at least. And so it's not a criticism of the way it's written, just to make a critique of it in terms of describing what you can expect if you go and read it. What I do not think that, given what the passages state, I don't think that we can come away from it saying that Islam is a peaceful religion. We can say that there are peaceful practitioners of the religion, and I've run into them. I was with the Madinka, for example, in my trip recently in Africa. I spent a lot of time with the Madinka. I wasn't inducted into their group. They wanted to induct me into their group, but I'm already an Igbo chief, and I could not, in good faith, allow that to happen. But
now, which tribe is that? I mean, not tribe, but where is that located? What country is the Igbo people?
Igbo, Nigeria. The Igbo, Nigeria. They are Nigeria has two major. I'm talking about two large ethnic populations. There are a lot of other ethnic groups as well. But the two major ethnic groups in Nigeria, the ones that are in the southeast, would be the Igbo, and the ones that will be in the more western part of Nigeria would be the Yoruba. But you probably can recall the Igbo by the fact that you can remember the Biafran War that occurred in 1967 for the 3 years of that war from 67 to 1970, and the Igbo were asking for their independence. They wanted to have what they call resource control, and because the oil is in the Delta region where that group is, and it is the government is pretty much from the more northern sections of the country. It used to be in Lagos, but now it's in they moved the capital out of Lagos, and so they want resource control, and the government has nationalized the oil, and so they don't get the benefit of it, and so they wanted to succeed from Nigeria, and it was not allowed, and they fought the civil war. This war, well, it wasn't a civil war even in that case. They were just trying to do what they did here in the United States. They were trying to leave and separate from the rest of the country, and they lost that war in 1970. They were forced back into the Union. I'm part of that. I feel more close to that group, although I've made other contacts in Africa with other groups. And this past time, the Madinka wanted to have me adopted as I guess I'm considered to be a prodigal son. But I told them that I was, in 2009, I had become an Igbo chief, and that would be inappropriate.
No, that's a side that people don't really aware of to me. The importance of that. You're an Igbo chief, not an honorary.
No, not honorary.
You're full voting.
I went through the ritual. I'm a full Igbo chief, and that was a high honor to have that bestowed upon me, and I take it very seriously. And I have to be beholden to that commitment that I made. There are a lot of things internal to the commitment that are not outside of the ceremony, so you have some things that you are restricted to, but that was a full ceremonial thing that occurred within the site where we were, in a place called Owerri.
No, it's like with the Igbo, when they were like that's closer to like what I'd say the eastern side section of African continent.
Yeah, Cameroon and that area there. Cameroon will be the nation south of it. So if you can envision Nigeria, then the country next to it, which also has some of the same affinities, ethnic affinities that you have in Nigeria, would be the Cameroon, where I've also been there, and then Benin. I really had to, be clear about what I was committed to, and I'm very clear about it, and that's why I did not allow. They were very open to what I was doing while I was there, and I guess because I was helping with certain things in the villages and things like that, they wanted to have me as a part of their group from a distant standpoint. But I told them that I appreciate your expression of Islam. In Gambia, Senegal, they have it similarly expressed in places like Guinea. I'm talking about Guinea-Bissau, as they call it, to distinguish it from Guinea-Conakry. One was Portuguese and one is the French. Guinea-Conakry is the French. Guinea-Bissau will be the Portuguese. So you have to navigate through the different cultures, and they make distinctions based upon the fact that those groups do not have the same dialect. But what I did notice in those places there is that Islam is in fact taught and practiced in very peaceful ways, and they made it very clear to me, because I'm Christian, and they made it very clear to me that I should come back during the time they have the Christmas over there, and they said that Muslims will be there, and they told me that if you come to the Ramadan, when they have the Ramadan feast, after the fasting that they have in Ramadan. In fact, one person just wrote me on Facebook and told me that I told him I was going to send a gift over there. They're getting ready for the Eid festival over there, and that's where they will slay a ram, or I guess they say ram, but I think it's a goat. I saw a lot of goats over there, and they have the EID feast, and he was saying that they wish I could, as if I'm going to do this, go back over there for that.
And the thing is too, I ran into this when I was in college. A lot of people were educated. I was taking an Arabic class. A lot of the people there thought Islam was an older religion than Christianity, even amongst the educated people.
Yeah.
And that Christianity had been already made a big, cut into Africa.
600 years old.
Before, matter of fact, in my opinion, the Coptic churches probably have more legitimate claim to be an older church than Roman Catholic Church does. So I mean, that's another misconception that people have. I mean, Islam is not the religion of somebody's ancestors. It was probably foisted upon them at the point of the story.
Yeah, it's not even on the continent of Africa until 639, which would have been 7 years after the death of the prophet. And we have to keep in mind that in that area where it went, the first place when it stepped into Africa, stepped onto the land space of Egypt. And Egypt had a Coptic, as you said, John, the background was Coptic. And in fact, the first papacy was not in Rome. The first papacy was in Alexandria, and it was moved from Alexandria into Rome. That would be part of what was going on around the time of 325 when they began to do some things from went to Constantinople, and that would be a change in the land space in which the citadel of the religion was being practiced. Before that, you had the Greek influence in terms of the Greeks being in northern Africa, in Egypt, with Alexandria had been founded in the aftermath of Alexander's death in 320. Let me get this right, in 323 AD, when Alexander died, having gone into Egypt around I'm sorry, that would be the, Alexander would have gone in 333 BC.
Yeah, because they were there for a long time.
And they were there 300 years.
They're there,
The Greeks were.
The
Ptolemy
dynasty
Yeah.
was actually Cleopatra, the last.
That's
that
right.
was the one we are so familiar with.
Cleopatra
Seven.
was the
Yeah.
seventh.
She was. They're all Ptolemaic people. They were from the west.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ptolemy, the Ptolemy line would have been the fact that when Soter, S-O-T-E-R, meaning the Savior, once Alexander died around 323 or 321 BC, then his generals would have taken over the lands where they were, and Soter I was the person that was the general in Egypt, and then became Ptolemy I, and that line of Ptolemies from Ptolemy I to about Ptolemy the 13th would be a 300-year rule of those Ptolemies, and that explains why you have down that line the Greek, the Bible, the Septuagint written in Greek, because that was the language at that point, international language at that point, given the Greek influence both in the southern part of Europe and the northern part of Africa. But there's no Islam at that point, as you were saying, John. The Islam would not have, there's no Islamic revelation, as a matter of fact, until the 610 AD. And there's no calendar that is an Islamic calendar at that point, because the Islamic calendar doesn't start until 622, which is called the flight. That's when the Muslims began to date their calendar, starting with the flight from Mecca to Medina, as the Prophet was in fact fleeing. There are a lot of different connections to it. You talk about the historical aspect to it. You can even talk about that when the flight occurred, everybody celebrates the flight going to Medina, but they also went into Ethiopia. And nobody talks about that, but the flight went in two different directions. One was to go to Medina, and the other one was to go into Africa and Ethiopia, because they were welcomed there by the Christians in Ethiopia. And there's an Ethiopian church there as well. And there's only one place, by the way, which is Ethiopia, that claims it has the Ark of the Covenant. There's no other country that claims it. Whether it's true or not, because they won't let you in there to see it, it is the only country that claims to have the Ark of the Covenant, saying that it was there as a result of the influence of Solomon.
That's it. One thing that we're really interested about the Ethiopian church, and I don't want to go too far into it, but they actually have, when you read the I think it's the 9th chapter of the book of Acts in the New Testament, 6th or 9th, I forget, but Philip is like walking around, he sees a guy in a chariot who's a eunuch from Ethiopia. He's reading from the book of Isaiah in that, and when he's reading from the chariot, and the book of Isaiah is a book obviously from Jewish tradition. And so he expounds to them what's meant by that prophecy in the book of Isaiah. It means the coming of Jesus. So he baptizes them, and then Philip allegedly disappears according to the biblical narrative, the New Testament narrative. There, though, I guess the Ethiopians actually have always retained quite a bit of the Jewish practices within the Coptic churches. They have more of a ties to the historical, I guess what you call the primitive form of Judaism. Like the temple, the emphasis on the temple, the commandments and everything, more so than even the Western Jews later on did. So the thing is, you can see that more manifest where Christianity and Judaism are tied together in the Ethiopian church, more than you can even the Western churches, which still calls their priest. I mean, they're priest, because that's like after that's that ties to Judaism. They had the priests in the temples, but the temple practices are no longer valid because the temple no longer exists. So I mean, so it's really unusual that the Ethiopian church had so much of that apparent in their practices.
Yeah, you could that's why when you hear people saying that someone is or is not a practitioner of a particular faith, you have to take that in the context that there are different expressions of it, and you can't say that one expression trumps the other. They're all expressions of the same. The embodiment of the religion has different expressions of it, as you have, for example, in Christianity, we have the Protestants and you have the Catholics, and in Protestantism, of course, you have all the other branches of it. But you have the two main branches of that religion: the Protestant religion, which starts in 1517 under Martin Luther, and you have the Catholic expression of it, and you can't say that either one of them is not Christian. They're both Christian, and they both fall under the umbrella of those tenets of that particular religion. So when I hear somebody saying, as they did with first of all President Obama, saying who is and who's not a Muslim, I don't know how he feels qualified to make that particular judgment. And in his speech they gave 2 weeks ago, a little bit longer now, but when he gave his speech about, I don't know what the speech was intended to do, but he was saying that the Islamic group they're not Islamic, and they're not a state. And I don't know upon what authority he can make that claim. But what I did notice with Megyn Kelly's program was that they had almost like a chorus of the people in that administration that have all picked up on that line. They had Charles Hagel. I won't call him Chuckle, I don't know him that well. Charles Hagel, and he was saying the group is not Islamic, and they had this airhead, John Kerry. I mean, give me a break. But John Kerry, the Secretary of State, we've had 2 in a row that's been a laughingstock in the international community. John Kerry, he was saying they're not Islamic. And one other person, then President, of course, having started that whole band, that band playing his song that they're not Islamic. And I kept asking myself the question, why are they trying to convince us that we don't have an Islamic group that calls itself Islamic? I mean, why is it that this is being denied by this administration? I mean, what is going on here? And it's like they're selling us something for reasons that have not yet come to the surface. I mean, you have some ideas about what's going on, but you don't really have it nailed down where it can be conclusive in terms of what all that means. In fact, today, somebody put on my website, on my Facebook site.
We got knocked off air.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, hold on. Let's see, start up again. Hold on.
Okay.
I got recording anyway, so the other spot. So.
Yeah, well, we gotta get out of Catherine's way. That's the only thing I can say. We have to do it over again.
Yeah. So I guess what? Let's start. I'll try to get at least the broadcast started again.
Okay. Okay, so are we gonna start over again then? Just start and then just do 30 minutes?
Yeah, just do as many minutes as we can to wrap it up. But I got it hard recorded on the other computer, so I can upload it up to Ustream. I mean, to YouTube.
But it'll be 2 different segments, all right?
Yeah, so this one's be full. That one over there in the hard
Oh,
recording.
it'll be full. That'll be full. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I just don't know what happened. I heard a tick-tock. You hear that too?
Yeah, I heard it.
And all of a sudden, you're gesturing and stuff, and it's stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, stopped recording. So it might be the subject matter.
Yeah, I think so. Wouldn't be surprised. They definitely have their radar focused on what people are doing out here.
Because they don't like it. It's like
They don't like it, and we are there. There is this NSA oversight, and we have to be honest about that. That what Snowden was doing was real.
He's like, a lot of conservatives are like, law and order types.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta hate him, and he's gotta be brought back and put on trial. He violated our Constitution. No.
If only they knew.
I said, no. What the government's doing violates the Constitution. He had to do it, and he gave up his life, basically.
Yeah, he did.
Let's face it, they're going to kill him at some point.
Yeah, he's a patriot. Snowden is definitely a patriot, and that's a problem in this day and age.
Yeah, I can't get us back online. Hold on here.
Okay. Have we stopped the recording on other?
No, that's the other one's recording, so we can just continue going on there if you want.
Okay. All right then. So I should just continue at this point. Okay. Well, we were just talking about being thrown off of the air on the other site, and those things happen. So we are not flustered by it. We expect to have these kinds of things that take place. Sometimes it's technical, and sometimes we suspect that it's not so much the technical part as it is the content that we cover here on some of the programs. It's just something that goes with the territory, and it doesn't bother. It doesn't bother us. We intend to be honest about what we do here, and we will do it in the face of some opposition, knowing that we're not going to be necessarily popular in what we do, but that's the kind of thing that you have to expect, and we keep our eyes on the prize, which is that we're trying to get the country as much as we can, do our part, get the country back on the right track, because somewhere we got off the track, and we're not there yet. Okay, I was making the point though that this denial of these radical groups being Islamic groups, I don't know what the reason that our leadership feels called upon to make a claim has been made by our officials, and why they will take it upon themselves to declare, if they're outsiders now, who is and who's not Islamic, and why that would even be something that they would take upon themselves to do. But there are certain things that are happening in the West that make it very interesting as a topic to look at and something to do research on, because today on my Facebook wall, somebody posted a video of a gentleman who was talking about what's happening in Sweden. And I watched the video. It's about 8 minutes long, and you can go to the site and look at it. And in the video, they talk about this gentleman's talking about how in Sweden they have the politicians made a law where you have to practice multiculturalism almost by force, and anyone that criticizes what is happening in Sweden, where they've invited almost, they've actually said they want to bring the people on the land space, because Sweden doesn't have a culture and it doesn't have this, and it is amazing that the politicians are doing this, bringing have invited the people in Syria into Sweden, knowing that the problem that they have right now in Europe is we already see the problem that is being created in Europe. And for them to be doing that raises the question, why are these politicians, despite how the people feel about it? John, do you have any question, any information, any view about why?
Yeah, it's like I do, and it's like very I think I mentioned it earlier, and I'm not going to go into that here, but
Okay.
I believe that I believe there's groups out there who want to see a shift in the population so they can actually control the Middle East. Totally. And another thing is too, we've denigrated Western culture so much. You know, we basically made people beat up on them in the press. It's detrimental. I mean, it was basically people resisted it first of all. Yeah, then they have to say, well, you got a point there, they got a point there, they got a point there. Well, they act like the West should be so hateful towards themselves because they violated people's violated people's cultures and destroyed other cultures. Every other culture did that itself too. Every culture they want to point to it. I don't care if it's in the Middle East, I don't care if it's Africa. They went and invaded other places, and we're so beat up on that. We feel so heavy and burdened. They took a Christian mentality, morality, twisted it, perverted it, and everything's supposed to be about social justice. Now trying to undo the past. You can't. Sacrifice your future for something that's done in the past is an insanity. You cannot go back and change the past.
Well, no doubt about it. We're looking at things that do not make a whole lot of sense from the standpoint of our own self-interest and our national interest definitely being sacrificed by what we're doing. It is amazing to me that we are standing on the sideline of our own downfall, allowing these things to happen. Our leaders have a lot to answer for, and I'm just trying to put a finger on why this impulse is existing at the top levels of the Western governments. These politicians in the West seem like they are capitulating, and it raises the question, at least in my mind, is there at some point where there's civilization exhaustion, where civilizations, the politicians that are running those countries, is there some kind of exhaustiveness that they arrive at where they simply surrender and give up in the face of that which is more vibrant and has more energy? And there's no doubt about the fact that Islam is energetic in terms of what it's trying to accomplish.
If you ever read Gibbon, Edward Gibbon, he was very critical of Christianity. I'm not. I see what he's going with, and I think there's some valid validity to it. But if you look at the demise of the Roman, Republic, the Roman Empire, basically it was so decayed already that Christianity, when it took away and started humanizing its possible subjects, it started making you examine what you were doing. You had it gave way because basically you couldn't defend this morally. Well, Christianity is now being used against the West on this sense because they don't want you to the Muslim Islamic world doesn't have. I'll say it. I'll probably get chastised for it, but they don't have the morality that Christianity embraces. Christians were corrupted, and they did horrific things in the name of the church. But the Scripture itself never says to do it. Whereas the leadership kept the Scripture away from the people, so they didn't know that they're violating the rules of Christianity. Once the Protestant Reformation came through, and people got to read the actual things, they started analyzing it more. They realized that what the church had done, the churches, both Protestant and Catholic, did was against the Scripture itself. Islam, on the other hand, says it's okay to murder your enemies. They call for it. That's a good Muslim. So when you got your Scripture saying it's okay to do it, matter of fact, it's a good and moral thing to do, that just encourages a basic human, reaction. That's what it does. So basically, everything boils down to what we value. We got to the point now where we valued trying to be right all the time, to the point where we're slitting our own throats.
Yeah, I think the West has given up, and it seems to be that we're being led to the slaughter by our leadership. And I don't know all of the factors that go into why we are seeing this impulse. Obviously, we've got to look at this and try to figure out why it's going on. But it's going on in too many different places for it to be accidental and not to believe there's some coordination that's taking place. We can go to a lot of conjectural reasons why it's happening, but as to whether it's happening or not, there's no question about that.
Politicians, they don't encourage that behavior in our country. They encourage they'll endeavor to actually undersee this transition, this great change you can believe in. And they'll do that because they're willing to now don a hat, the garb of a Muslim. They want to be the center focus. These people are not, they have no real personal loyalties. The only loyalties they have is that which allows them to keep their power, get money rolling in, and be able to have sway over other people. That's what they desire.
Yeah.
I'm not misgiven.
No, I understand what you're saying.
They're pseudo-learned sociopaths. These people are not connected to anything with any real concrete connections. There's no emotional connections. Whatever's advantageous.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, John, that sociopathic disorder goes with the territory of politicians?
Yeah, I do. I'd say 95% of the people involved in politics
mm-hmm.
are sociopathic.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at, everybody like Newt Gingrich, but I mean, the man was a very sociopathic individual. From what I understand, it could have been media hype, but he served his wife with papers for divorce when she was going through cancer treatments in bed in the hospital. I mean, so basically, anything's new and fashionable, he wants to be part of. Everything that's got to be, they got to try to resonate. They got to be all things to all people. They can't be, there's no center to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I go back and read some of the books I read when I was in college, I go back now reading it through a different lens, and I'm reading a lot of books now that's outside the mainstream of what is really something that's assigned, like in a university, for example. These books are outside that mainstream. And I'm reading it just to see the impulses that I have been overlooking in my first going through these books as part of the university requirement. And I'm reading it now for a different reason. I'm just trying to look at the impulses that I'm seeing play out in the political arena. And I have to say that it is quite interesting when you go back and look at it through another perspective, through another lens, and try to figure out, okay, what is going on here, and why is this taking place? And what are the psychologies that are involved in why this particular thing played out. And when you think of it in psychological terms, you see the sociopathic aspect to it. And that is something that I'm a lot more attentive to right now. I guess that's why I've said in the past, if I had to do that paper I did in my undergraduate classes, what Lord Acton's comment about power corrupts and power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think about it. Of course, I know if I did that paper again, I would not write the nonsense that I now realize I was writing back in that time period, because I thought the corrupting influence was power. But I did not take into consideration that there are certain types of people that run for political office, and we think that because we are these people, but none of us are pursuing the things they're pursuing. We think that because we all put our pants in the same way, put our dress on the same way, those of us that some wear pants and some wear other things. But those of us who wear pants and know about that, what that means, and okay, let me leave that alone, because I know I've been getting some people calling me up about that. But those of us who understand psychology a little bit, just a little bit at least, I have studied it, and I have one of my minors in that, and I delve into it every once in a while, just as a way of saying, okay, let me look at the psychology of this particular event. I think we have to go back and look and see the kind of people that have run, that led Lord Acton to make the conclusion that he made, that power is a corrupting influence. And because he saw it wherever there were people that were in power, so he said the tendency is for the power to be the corrupting agent. But although I saw it through that lens at that time, I don't see it that way anymore, because I think that we're talking about an abstraction here. You put power somewhere in abeyance, away from those persons that are actually individuating it and using it, or using it through the individuation, and see if that is what is happening with that use of the power. I mean, individuals have to use power. Power can make use of itself. And if there is a consistency in terms of how it has been used by those who are wielding political influence, then we need to look at the wielders of that, and not power, which is something that has no will of its own. It only can have a will through the expression of those who are making use of it. So I would write that paper very differently now, given how much more information you get over time, and you begin to look at things in a much wider lens. But that's back in that time period, this is now. And I think what we're looking at on the national level, and also we're looking at internationally, certainly in the West, is that there's some impulse that's taking place here that we've got to pay more attention to, because we're not being told the truth about what it is that we're facing. And this denial that you heard, it was almost like a song, a chorus President Obama comes out and says that Islamic State is not Islamic, nor is the state. Then you hear Hagel talking about it, and John Kerry is saying it. Other persons are mentioning. It's like, what would be the purpose of that?
Another thing is too, Hagel, and I don't know if people realize this, he's a Republican. He's not a Democrat. And he was actually critical of, years ago, he was on the hot seat because he was critical of Israel. Now he's like on board and like listening. I mean, this guy is basically, you stick your hand up inside of him, you can make him his puppet. That's what I'm saying. This man has got no backbone himself. I mean, he's got no backbone himself. I mean, he changes with, that's a perfect example of what a politician is.
Yeah. I don't know how they,
no no spine. No
I don't know how they can do that and sleep at night. I have a lot of, opposition out there, but I don't have a problem sleeping at night because you have to have something that you stand for and, expect, it's like what Ayn Rand said when she said that one should be judged, one should judge and expect to be judged in return. And I expect to be judged. I'm saying a lot of things out here that I believe are true and things that I've searched. I don't just jump out here and say anything. I try to make sure that I've done some homework before I begin to make public some things I talk about. But when you get out there and your voice is different, you need to expect to be criticized. You got to take the bitter with the sweet. And when that happens, I expect it. And it's like water. To me, it's like water rolling off the wings of a duck. You have to have oil glands, and that it doesn't. I don't get wet. But the point I'm making is that if you don't stand for anything, then of course there's nothing to criticize. Nobody can come at you and say. There are some people that are so blurred in how they present themselves, you can't even tell what is in back of their thought, and you really don't know where to stand on anything because they don't make any positions clear, because they don't want to be identified as standing with this issue or standing with another issue, particularly if it's in fact unpopular.
Every time they go into to make a speech, they are actually briefed of who the audience is.
Yeah.
Basically, they can say what they know that audience wants to hear. They walk and go down the road. And Clinton,
politicians.
They show clips of Clinton, particularly,
Yeah.
within days of each other, stating things that he said he was for. There was direct opposition what he already previously stated. So and I use him because they have a lot of video clips of him, and they're all like that.
They are like that. Yeah, that's why I turn them off. And those who are their mouthpieces, the media, that is the sounding board through which they express, we hear the expressions of the nonsense that they are emoting out there. I have decided that my initial response to it, which was to take the programs and then watch it later to get through the commercials, don't have to worry about spending an hour with an hour program and getting about 31 minutes of information. I decided that was inappropriate also, and I just turned it off. I just don't watch TV anymore, unless I'm just specifically watching a program. I may watch a boxing event, for example, but I don't get any information from TV anymore. If a television commentator has said anything, I get it because somebody has see it on the net, and it might be something that I want to comment on in my Facebook post. I need to watch it for that reason. But in terms of sitting there and watching these programs, news programs, and these commentary programs they have on the evening segments of these cable networks, I just don't. I don't do that anymore because I see what that is. I finally have come to the conclusion that that is a media through which we are being misdirected and our focus is being altered from what it would be if we didn't have that kind of information to process. So I don't spend any time with that. My information comes out of those independent sources. In fact, I was saying this the other day. This is my friend said, my stand now is anything that is licensed by the government, anything that has an FCC license is suspect in terms of what they're presenting, because if you have to have licensing for your broadcast, then those who are licensing you, anyone that has that power that's displeased with the broadcast, can in fact stop that. And because they have that power to stop it, then the person has to be beholden to those persons to make sure that they do not step on the toes of those that have that kind of power. Let me mention a few books here that I brought to the studio, because I think that we have to read, rather than watching TV so much. Maybe we need to spend more time ferreting out information ourselves from what we are doing through our own independent sources, away from being told what reality is. We are finding it out by researching it for ourselves. And I think that the 4 books that tie into our discussion today would be, there are a lot of books, but I brought 4 books that I think will give us some insight about what is going on here, away from the discussion whether or not ISIS is Islamic or not. The question is what's happening within the frame of that which is being defined then as Islamic. And there's a book out by Robert Spencer. I think Robert Spencer is probably one of the major voices out there that's writing. His book called Stealth Jihad is a very important book. Stealth Jihad, stealth meaning that it ain't all about getting on planes and running into buildings. That jihadist kind of expression is obviously that, but there are some other more subtle expressions which is carried out as well, and stealth will be simply something as a conscious attempt to expand your influence just through, like, for example, procreation could be a part of it. And that's what we see happening in Europe, and that's what Mark Stein is talking about in his book called America Alone, the End of the World as We Know It. And he has this globe and his flags in it, and the American flag is the only flag that is there, surrounded by the Islamic flag. And he's saying that given what is happening around the world, America will at some point be alone. Well, that's what Robert Spencer would call stealth jihad. It's not all about this more visible expression of it that we saw on 9/11. Well, Spencer has written those kinds of books. He's trying to be a warner of the West of what is really going on, really under the nose of the Western leaders that seem like not to be able to get it, or if they do get it, they're not telling us about it. And if they know it and not telling us about it, then there's got to be a reason for it. And we need to research that and find out what that is about. It's called The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades. I will mention those 3 books, but I want to read something off the cover of this book, because some of the things that he talks about in the book there are really quite specific to what we are seeing right now. One of the points he makes is Islam teaches that Muslims must wage war to impose Islamic law on non-Muslim states. And that's what I see. I have even written in my post that I think what we are witnessing right now is what can be called World War III, although it is a continuation really of that which has been going on since at least since 632. I think at least at that point. And it might even go back to 622 with the flight. But certainly I think at 632 we begin to see the expansionist expression of Islam. So when he says Islam teaches that Muslims must wage war to impose Islamic law on non-Muslim states, I have to be honest and say that's what I see going on. He also, this is Robert Spencer, also says American Muslim groups are engaged in a huge cover-up of Islamic doctrine in history. Now that comes back to what we were saying earlier about are you Islamic, are you not Islamic? I've seen expression of Islam in Africa in every state that I was in this summer, and I was in 4 different states. this summer, I saw an expression of Islam that was very peaceful. I saw them coexisting peacefully, amicably, invitationally with other religions, both those that were indigenous, called the animist kind of religions, and then those that were Christians, and they were in accord with, not in accord with the teaching, but they were in accord in terms of the harmony, in terms of they're in the same space, same land, and there was no tension between the groups. I saw that with my own eyes. And so there is that expression of Islam that is, you can see that would not be having any type of animus against the ones who have a different religious view. I saw that, so I know that is true. But I would not say that those who don't have that expression of it are not Islamic, as the president said. I think they're both Islamic, and I also think they're both sincere. And that needs to be looked at as well in terms of what they mean. He also says, as Robert Spencer says, today's jihad terrorists have the same motives and goals as Muslims had during the Crusades. And then he says the Crusades were defensive conflicts. In other words, the Crusades were the Christians defending themselves against the expansion of Islam. And we all think about let me make sure that date is right. Yeah, 732 at the Battle of Tours, when the Moors were stopped at the Pyrenees. Otherwise, it would have gone into Europe, because the next step would have been France, and then it would have been spreading into Western Europe at that point. But Charles Martel, which is, let's say, Charles the Hammer, he got the name Martel because he stopped the encroachment going further into Europe, so he got the name called the Hammer. Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer was the expression there of that, given that name because of his stopping the expansion. Muslim persecution of Christians has continued for 13 centuries, and it still goes on. That's Robert Spencer's book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam. American Jihad, this is Stephen Emerson's book, The Terrorists Living Among Us. I think you should read this book, The Terrorists Living Among Us, because this idea that ISIS, if we better stop ISIS from coming here. ISIS is already here in the United States. And we can just stop that right now in terms of trying to act like it is over there, and we're going over there to stop ISIS before they can come over here. They're already over here on this land space, and we are ignoring that fact. We can keep on this you attacking us 911, and we just fly planes over in Afghanistan, but don't forget the 19 persons that didn't come from Afghanistan. They're right here on the soil of the United States. This is a book right here that Europe ought to read, particularly Sweden. You ought to read this book, given what was on Facebook this morning, where this person was saying that Sweden is claiming that they can allow this to, we want to bring in more of these kinds of people on the land space. It's called While Europe Slept, How Radical Islam is Destroying the West from Within, Bruce Bauer's book, B-A-W-E-R. And then the last one is what we see also going on in Europe at this point. It's called Eurasia, meaning Europe and Arab world, the Euro-Arab axis. And that's something that is taking place right before our very eyes as well. How it plays out, we have to think about how we want it to play out, because unless we can get a handle on it and understand it, it's not going to play out to our advantage. Okay, we got to get out of here. Hope you learned something about it, and you'll hopefully read some of these books. Until next time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.